Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're going to tackle something I think we're all guilty of, that deeply ingrained I know best leadership mindset. We're pulling directly from Jon Antonucci's insights on servant-minded leadership, specifically a really fascinating idea from Chapter 15. He calls it moving from the highway to the byway. If you've ever felt like, your team just isn't taking ownership, or if you're absolutely exhausted from trying to constantly enforce your perfectly crafted plans, well, this explainer is going to flip your perspective completely upside down.
Okay, I want you to picture a time in your career when you had the objectively correct plan. Like you had the data, you had the experience, the logic was absolutely flawless. So you hand this perfect plan to your team and it completely fails to motivate them. They're dragging their feet, the energy is just flat, and the results? Totally mediocre. It really raises a fascinating question, right? Why exactly does a perfect plan fail? Usually, our gut instinct is to blame the execution. We think, oh, they just didn't get it. But what if the problem wasn't the plan itself? What if the problem was simply that it was your plan and not theirs?
To brilliantly illustrate this tension between expert logic and team ownership, the source material shares a super personal, really vulnerable story from the author. Get this. His wife had been in a severe car accident and completely wrecked her truck. Now, looking at it logically, his expert plan was incredibly simple and efficient. Don't fix it, just take the insurance money, go buy a new vehicle. Makes total sense, right? But his wife had a completely different, honestly, kind of amateur plan. She wanted to fix the wrecked truck herself, out in the garage, working alongside her dad. Logistically, from an expert's point of view, this seemed like literally the wrong way to handle it. Not efficient, not the most cost-effective on paper. But as the author tried to push his superior, logical plan, he hit this massive revelation. While he was wrestling with this, and you can imagine how frustrating that must have been, he remembered this profound insight a mentor had shared with him years ago. And it goes like this. Letting people do things their way is often more productive than asking them to do it his way. I mean, really let the weight of that sink in for a second. The mentor was basically explaining that the raw passion and dedication people bring when they're executing their own solution, it's almost always way more successful than forcing them to implement a dictated, quote-unquote, superior way. This realization completely shattered the author's need to enforce his own ideas. He realized, okay, I have to step back. I have to let her try it her way, even if he firmly believed it was the wrong approach. And the results of this story? Absolutely astounding when you compare the two paths. If they had gone with the expert's way, just buying the new car, it would have cost tens of thousands of dollars. But more importantly, forcing his logical way would have totally destroyed her morale. It would have robbed her of all that ownership. Instead, they went with the owned way. She and her dad worked tirelessly on that truck for a few weekends. They got it fixed, completely operational, for under $3,000. Plus, she got this priceless father-daughter bonding time and just an immense sense of pride and a job well done. Now, was the truck immaculately restored to factory perfection? No, but the whole process was driven by passion and dedication, and that made it vastly more successful in the end than the supposed right way. So how does this actually translate to our daily work environments? Well, as leaders, we often think we're practicing servant leadership by swooping in, giving our teams the absolute best tools and the right answers so they can do their best work. We fix the process, we dictate the workflow to save them time. But we really have to stop and ask ourselves a pretty uncomfortable question. Is your helpfulness actually just a disguised ego? Ouch, right? When we tell someone exactly how to do something, we convince ourselves we're serving them. We pat ourselves on the back for being great leaders. But the source material challenges us to look a little deeper. Because honestly, most of the time, we're actually just serving ourselves, our timeline, our specific agenda, our reputation, or, yeah, quite simply, our ego. Which brings us to a bit of a gotcha list. These are the subtle ways we enforce that rigid my way or the highway mentality, and a lot of times we don't even realize we're doing it. Some are super obvious, right? Pulling the I'm the boss and I said to do it this way card, yeah, that's pretty blatant. Or leaning heavily on tenure. I have a lot of experience. Just do it the way I told you. But look at how sneaky these next two are. I've written out exactly how to do this so that we succeed. See what we did there? We disguised extreme control as setting people up for success. We literally packaged micromanagement as a favor. Or my personal favorite, the sneakiest one of all, you can do it however you'd like, but this is the way that I would do it if I were you. I mean, these statements might sound helpful on the surface, but they really reflect a heart that is totally convinced we know the absolute best way, and everyone else's way is just inferior. And doing that, it completely kills the passion and ownership we just saw in that truck story. And this leads us to a truly foundational truth about leadership. A cup that is already full cannot be filled. Think about it.
if you genuinely believe you have all the answers, the exact minute that happens is the exact minute you cease to effectively lead. Why? Because the person who already knows everything can't be taught anything. A leader who operates entirely from a place of knowing lacks the essential humility and empathy you need to really see and unlock your team's potential. Now, does this mean you just completely step back? That you never ever give advice or share your hard-earned experience? No, of course not. But it does mean your mind has to be completely open to alternative ideas and solutions. Your way is simply a way. It is not the way.
And that is the core concept presented in the source: servant-minded leadership. This approach is kind of like gently holding and elevating an idea with care. You're nurturing it rather than dictating it. A servant-minded leader sees their team members as unique contributors, as dynamic collaborators. They fundamentally get that alternative ways of doing things aren't wrong just because they're different from the leader's initial vision. So instead of forcing everyone down that rigid, high-speed highway of their own pre-planned ideas, they cherish the diverse, creative byways that their team members genuinely want to explore. They provide supportive hands, they care with their heart, but ultimately, they step back. They step back and let the team own the light bulb, the idea itself.
So I want to end with a really provocative question today, directly inspired by our source material. Have you ever let someone do a job wrong just so they could own it? I really want you to let that sit. Think about it the next time someone brings you an amateur plan or a process that just isn't quite how you would do it yourself. Consider taking the byway. Let them own the process. You might just find that the raw passion, dedication, and immense pride they bring to the table far outweighs the sterile logistical perfection of your own expert plan. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep challenging that mindset, and I'll see you in the next one.